Ontario was the first province in Canada to deliver air ambulance services by helicopter, beginning in 1977. But in recent years, Ornge, as the service is now called, has been in the public eye more for a multi-million-dollar spending scandal and for safety flaws than for the kind of life-saving work their mandate is meant to deliver. Ornge has been trying to turn the page and restore public confidence in their service. President and CEO Andrew McCallum joins us now to give us a progress report. It's nice to meet you and welcome to TVO.
Thank you for having me.
I think we should just start because of the recent headlines out of Attawapiskat, and they're just so awful. And you do have a connection to what's going on there right now. Why don't you just tell us what Ornge is doing related to the crisis there?
Ornge is the principal means for transporting people who need specialized health care. So of course in Attawapiskat, with the recent crisis, we've been involved in transporting patients who needed care in more southern hospitals. So we've been involved in probably between 10 and 15 cases, moving people out so they can get the care they need.
Now, if you had a viral epidemic or a quarantine of people, for example, you would take one approach. If you have a mental health epidemic, as seems to be the case up there, how does one handle that?
Well, for us as a transport agency, it's handled in a very similar fashion to the viral epidemic you speak about, except that our staff obviously don't need to be quarantined. But with people who need to be transported, we have a two-person crew. Depending on the state of the patient, we might need other people. In this case, we didn't in most cases. And they're transported to the most appropriate facility, which could be Moose Factory, which is, as a hospital, Timmins, even Kingston, which has a particular relationship with the James Bay Coast people.
You can go Attawapiskat to Kingston nonstop?
You absolutely can.
Huh, okay. How long do you plan to be there in Attawapiskat?
Well, we have a continuing role in Attawapiskat. We were there before the crisis. We'll be there after it, so we continue, and we'll be there for them when they need us.
Okay. Let's get down to business now, shall we? This is the 2013 Auditor General's report, which you're well aware of. You got brought in to kind of clean up what many people saw as the mess that was Ornge. So I guess before we just look at the highlights of that report, I do have to ask you, why would any sane person want the job you now have?
Well, for me, the opportunity to clean something up that I think is vital and something that I'm intensely interested in, both aviation and medicine, are keen interests of mine. I've been involved in both through my entire career, and so the opportunity to come back and get something like this back on the rails was irresistible.
Now, back in the day, if the government wanted to fix up an agency, they'd grab one of their sort of partisan patronage people off the back benches or something and pluck them in there. You're not from that world, right?
I am not.
Where are you from?
My background is emergency medicine. I'm a physician. I trained in emergency medicine. I was chief of the emergency at Sunnybrook. In Hamilton, I was chief of staff. I then went to the coroner's office. I was chief coroner, as you might know, in the province for 5 years before I took this job. So I have both a public service and a clinical background.
Okay. In March 2012, the then Auditor General of Ontario, Jim McCarter, he issued his report into Ornge after his investigation, and here's some of what he recommended. He said at the time, since Ornge's funding increased by 20% during its first 4 years of operation, the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care should determine whether Ornge's costs are reasonable and whether it has the right amount of resources. He also said Ornge should better track the details of its work to ensure response times and operating costs are acceptable. And he said to ensure safety and good patient care, the ministry should conduct unannounced inspections of Ornge, and Ornge should review patient complaints to look for systematic problems. And I guess the first obvious question is, what has Ornge done to address these concerns?
Well, we've done a lot. We first of all, to turn the question around a bit, the unannounced inspections occur regularly. So we've been involved in those, and the ministry's been in a number of times, and every time they've been satisfied with what we're doing. So that in itself has been, I think, very useful. We do track clinically what happens to all our patients, and we're very careful to understand if there's an adverse event or something like that. We track it, we make corrections, and ensure that it doesn't happen again. With respect to the value for money side of things, we've been very involved in a number of initiatives to try and get the most value for the money. This is a very expensive proposition, as you well know, but nonetheless, we constantly track, and we're looking for ways to shave costs here and there without affecting safety or without affecting patient care.
One of the things the auditor was concerned about was spending that was out of control. If you look at the ministry funding in 2010-11, Ornge's budget's about $150 million. If you go a few years later, it's up to $176.4 million. Again, begging the question, has Ornge really constrained costs all that much?
Well, I think we have, and I think you have to understand that the background is that costs in aviation, and there's a parallel in healthcare, go up constantly. The typical cost of aviation rate increase is 6% per year. So we have to deal with that, and we're in a regulated environment. We're not allowed to not do things that have to be done. So that cost, in my view, is a justifiable cost, but nonetheless, I recognize that it's a very expensive proposition.
And the Minister of Health is okay with a 17.9% increase over that period of time?
I don't know if I'd use the word okay, but they've been satisfied with the work we're doing.
2013, a helicopter crashed shortly after taking off in Moosonee. 4 Ornge employees were killed. I think Ornge was charged 17 different charges in relation to that incident. What have you done to improve the safety record at Ornge?
Well, as you know, that's a matter that's still before the courts, and we've retained counsel. We'll be defending those charges. But I will say that safety is at the forefront of everything we do. And so we've been constantly working to improve safety as we go along. That's an iterative process. We hired a new director of aviation safety who's got a world reputation. The company is led by a very senior executive in the aviation industry in Canada. That all came after 2013. We also have a new director of aviation maintenance, so that we, I think, have state-of-the-art maintenance of our aircraft. And that's a constant improvement process.
Well, let me ask about the design. Now, admittedly, much of what I know about this comes out of both the auditor's report and following question period in the legislature, where the opposition have made allegations over the course of the last several years. And one of the allegations they have made is that the design of these helicopters was bad, and as a result of that, patients died. And they believe Ornge is culpable as a result of that. Do you accept that finding?
Well, from my perspective, let's take a step back.
Okay.
The helicopters that were bought. And if you were doing it now, would you make the same decision? I think that's something you could debate. But we're where we are. These helicopters are capable. They're very robust. We know how to maintain them. They've got a 98% uptime rate. Now they've got
What
great...
does that mean, 98%
Well, it
uptime
means
rate?
that we have a helicopter available at the base to fly 98% of the time. And that's in the helicopter industry because helicopters are very maintenance intensive, is a very impressive figure in my view. So the helicopter's there. So the question is, should we change it at this point? And we looked at that last year. As you might know, we did a request for information from the industry. And the key premise was that it can't cost more money to the taxpayer. So in other words, if we're going to swap these helicopters out and replace them with something less expensive, can we do it without incurring a cost? We concluded we could not do that. There just isn't a helicopter that can be bought now that would result in a cost-neutral situation.
So we're stuck with what we've
So
got.
we're working with what we've got. They're great helicopters. The pilots love them. They're very, very efficient. They're fast. They're one of the fastest helicopters out there. So they do a lot of things well. And I think to characterize them as anything other than a capable, robust helicopter isn't really accurate.
Well, again, I'm just conveying what opposition members in the legislature have said. And I think on one occasion they said the height is too low. And if you need to sort of bend a patient forward, it can't be done. And as a result, bad care.
In
Is that
2012, that was true. In 2013, that was fixed. So you can do CPR and you can elevate the head of the stretcher through the use of an interior that's been, it's an interim interior. We actually are going to a final version, which we've involved staff in. So staff have been they're giving us suggestions. They're working with us to ensure that we get the best design. And one of the big things is it'll have a roll-on, roll-off stretcher, which ergonomically is a big deal from a paramedic standpoint. Right now it's a sled, and that is not the ideal, but it works. So it's serviceable, but there's a better design coming.
So just, I'll wrap this up here, but to clarify, to confirm, you do not believe Ornge is legally responsible and culpable for any deaths that may have taken place on their watch, related to that issue I just mentioned?
I would say that we provided all the care we're supposed to provide in the manner it's supposed to be provided, and I think we met all the standards.
Okay, let me raise one more issue, and again, a lot of this comes out of question period, which I spend far too much time watching. This is complicated, so follow the puck here. Since 2012, the Ontario Provincial Police have been investigating a business deal between Ornge and this Italian company you got the choppers from, Augusta Westland, am I saying it right?
Correct.
Is that what it's called? Okay. And we recently learned that you are leasing a helicopter from this same Italian company without an open bidding process, despite the fact that this is a fairly controversial company that you have some past problems with. So the question is, why lease from this company that you already have past problems with?
Well, the fundamental premise, I think you have to understand the background to get the answer. This helicopter is the helicopter that we've determined is the best one to continue with, given all the factors we just talked about. So the issue is that in 2014, I asked our staff, and they did, move the AW139 to Thunder Bay and to Kenora, where we'd been flying the old Sikorskys. They're 35 years old. That left only Moosonee with the 35-year-old Sikorsky. We've had trouble staffing that because of some recent illness and injury. And as a consequence, we've had some challenges there. So we determined that the best thing to do was to have the same helicopter throughout the fleet. Therefore, retiring the Sikorsky and bringing in an AW. That's why the 11th AW was sought. However, I want you to know that all the procurement rules were followed. There is nothing about this deal that's anything other than compliant with the broader public sector rules. We issued what's called an advanced contract award notice because we thought there was only one helicopter. In fact, there are more than one helicopter because other bidders came forward and said, no, we think we can help you. So now we've issued a tender. So we have a tender out there, and all the rules have been followed in that respect. Okay,
so it's more an optics/political problem because you've gone back to this same company that you've had the bad history with?
Well, you know, if you have a Ford car, you've got to buy Ford parts. So we have an AW, we buy the parts from the manufacturer, and it's really a matter of dealing with the original equipment manufacturer who's the only manufacturer of the parts that we need.
Now, as a result of Ornge's history, this, can I call it a company? What would you call it?
We're a private not-for-profit corporation.
Okay. It is under much more scrutiny, increased accountability, transparency, requests from the outside. How much more difficult does that make your job in trying to run this company?
Well, it's a challenging job. You know, an organization that wasn't under the intense lens, you could do things perhaps a little more readily. But I accepted that when I came to the role. I know that we're going to be carefully watched, and that people are going to be only looking for something to go wrong. And my goal is to make sure that everything goes right.
One of the things I mean, I wonder whether one of the things that requires you to do is you may have a bright idea that could be kind of interesting and innovative, but you might be too afraid to go after it because if it goes wrong, oh my God, we're back in question period, and the whole ton of bricks is going to come down on the head of me and my minister again, and therefore you don't pursue that. Is that a risk the other way?
I think it is a risk. It's one that we guard against constantly. I think you have to have the courage to say this is the right thing to do, and if it's the right thing to do for patients, our job is to convince the politicians and the bureaucrats that it's the right thing to do.
From what you knew about Ornge's operations in the past, when it was under different leadership, did they really take a kind of a wild, wild west approach to running the thing?
Well, I think the focus was very diffused in the past. They were looking at global operations and doing things that were not related to Ontario as a means to support the Ontario operation. That was the problem in my view. We're entirely focused on the patients of Ontario and providing service to the healthcare system.
How are we going to know whether or not things are truly as improved as you say they are?
I think the proof will be in the pudding. When people need us, are we there? Do you read about service issues that occur in the papers? And I think you've seen a decrease in that.
That's all I got. You got anything else you want to add?
Oh, thank you.
You're happy?
Yeah, you covered the areas I thought you'd like to talk about.
You are correct, sir. Andrew McCallum. He is the president and CEO of Ornge, and we thank you for coming into TVO tonight.
Thank you very much.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.